Let's get to this verdict. So if you guys remember, I'm assuming that you were following along with this trial if you're watching this live stream, right? So we don't need to go over all of the facts of the case, the facts of the trial, but we can do just a little bit of a reminder that there were three statements that were alleged defamatory, that Johnny Depp alleged sorry, let me back up for a second. Okay, so Johnny Depp alleged Amber Heard made 3 defamatory statements about him in the Washington Post, right? There was the title, there was another one that was referring back a couple of years, and then there was another one after that. So she then turned and countersued against him and alleged that there were several statements, 3 statements that were made on Johnny's behalf that she alleges were defamatory. Those were made by Adam Waldman, his attorney. We had all kinds of discussions on this channel about the litigation privilege and why does that not fit into the litigation privilege. I've wrapped my brain around it several times, and I'm still not even entirely convinced that this is a proper situation for defamation because of that litigation privilege. But I think that ultimately what happened was because these were statements that were made to the press and not in a court, and not in the filing, even though it had to do with litigation. It was in the scope of his representation during litigation. And he was being an attorney that was speaking to the press about this litigation. Everyone understood what the context was. Still, I guess that the distinction probably was that he was speaking to the press. So anyhow, the verdict. In the end, the jury found that Johnny Depp's alleged statements against Amber Heard, that all 3 statements that he alleged were defamatory were in fact defamatory, basically meaning that her statements that he is a domestic abuser and that he abused her in all kinds of ways, physically, emotionally, sexually, the ways that she described in those statements were untrue and they were in fact defamatory. So as a result, they awarded him $10 million in compensatory damages, $5 million in punitive damages. So that's the first bit. Number 1, what are compensatory damages? Compensatory damages comes from the word compensate, right? So compensate meaning that you are paying someone for something that they have lost. So when we're talking about defamation, we're talking about usually some form of economic loss that they have had as a result of those defamatory statements. A lot of times it has to do with work that was lost. Either they lost their job, they lost their salary, or they lost certain Hollywood film projects. So that's why there was time that was spent talking about Pirates of the Caribbean 6, the fact that he had made $25 million on POTC 5, the fact that he made so much in 2017 and then 2018, 2019, all of a sudden everything went away and he had to really fight for the small projects that he was able to get. So that's what the compensatory damages is getting at, is trying to compensate him for what he has lost as a result. Punitive damages are basically just where the jury looks at the defendant and says, you know what, screw you, you messed up, you did this horrible, awful, terrible thing, and we want to punish you. That's where punitive damages comes from, is punish. So it's just they very much dislike what the defendant did, and they want to send a message to the defendant. That's what punitive damages are for. Now, in Virginia, there is a statutory limit on punitive damages. So that statutory limit is $350,000. A lot of people have asked, so then what is that? What happens to the rest of the $4.65 million out of the punitive damages? What happens to those? Well, they basically go away. It's like, think of it like you have a big jar, right? You have a jar for compensatory damages, and those can go up to $50 million because that's what he's alleged, right? He alleged in his complaint that he's due $50 million for the defamation. So that jar is about $50 million full. They put in $10 million, so that fits in there. And then you've got the punitive damages jar, putting sand in it. Let's say it's a jar of sand. So you want to put in enough sand to fill $5 million into this punitive damages jar. But the punitive damages jar only fits $350,000 worth of sand. So everything else just falls out. So jar of dirt. Thanks, guys. I messed it up. I even had the whole cheeky reference and everything that I wanted to have, and I even still messed it up. Thanks, guys. Or jar. Yeah. Well, we're not going to say the other jar that came up during the trial. So yeah. So he's got these two jars of dirt at this point, right? So he's got the jar of dirt that could fit 50 million that they put 10 million into. That fits. And then he's got the other jar of dirt that could fit $350,000. They tried to put in 5 million, but the rest of it just falls out. So that's what he's able to walk away with, is both of those jars. I hope that makes sense. So on the other side, what they found was that one of those three statements that Amber alleged were defamatory, the statements made by Adam Waldman on behalf of Johnny Depp, still have all kinds of questions about whether that can properly be attributed to Johnny Depp. But like I said, I kind of already referred to the litigation privilege. We don't have to go too deep into it, but this is what the jury ultimately decided was one of those three statements they found to be defamatory. Now, a lot of people want to, I've seen some of the media response to this say, okay, well, this is a muddled verdict because the jury also found that the hoax claim statement was defamatory. Basically, to say that she had committed a hoax was defamatory. That's not exactly true, though. It's not accurate. And well, I'll get to that in just a second. But first, let's talk about the damages aspect of what she got from the verdict. So for the one of the three statements that they found to be defamatory, what the jury awarded her was $2 million in compensatory damages. Now, of course, she asked for $100 million, didn't prove it. She proved about 2 million. So this is, to me, that number is proper if they actually did find defamation in this. This number seems like it's reasonable if you follow that conclusion. And in punitive damages, $0. They did not want to punish Johnny Depp in any way for the statements. So $2 million. Basically, what that means is you can balance that out. At the end of the day, she owes him $8,350,000. So what exactly does all of this mean? So a lot of people are confused about the fact that this is like a so-called muddled verdict, right? Because both of them win when people were expecting one of them to win or the other one to win. But we said throughout this trial, those of us on the panel, we said throughout that there was a good possibility that both sides technically could win. And when we said, what does that look like? This is what we said was, we hypothesized that we could say, okay, so the jury finds that Amber Heard lied about how she characterized Johnny Depp as a domestic abuser, either because they believed that he didn't abuse her at all, or because they thought that her claims went too far from what actually happened and were enough of a misrepresentation that they could be considered a lie that was harmful to Johnny Depp's reputation, right? So, and two of these things that were a little bit of wild cards were the definition of abuse and the definition of a lie, because those two things were not exactly defined here. In a normal DV case, abuse would be very much defined according to statute. But because this wasn't exactly a DV case, it's a defamation case, a lot of that comes down to the interpretation of the jury. What exactly does it mean when Amber says Johnny abused me? What exactly does it mean when Johnny says she lied about that? So, and the specific things that she says within those statements, right? Because the jury was looking at each individual statement to parse through them to say, is she lying or is she being pretty much truthful here? So, so what we said was that it could be that the jury found at the same time that Amber Heard lied about how she characterized Johnny Depp as a domestic abuser. And at the same time, Adam Waldman / Johnny Depp lied about his characterization of the hoax incident on May 21st, 2016. So in that respect, basically what I mean by that is that maybe she lied about Johnny Depp being a domestic abuser, but maybe she didn't go so far as to create a hoax around it. Or maybe she did lie about the hoax, but maybe some of those details were something that the jury disagreed with. And this is basically, maybe I'm getting to my conclusion a little bit too quickly here, but basically as a reminder, Johnny Depp won on all the statements that he alleged were defamatory. And on top of that, he was awarded punitive damages, a lot of them. So to say that this is like a muddled verdict, I don't think so. I really don't think that this is a muddled verdict at all. I think that this really is more than anything a very successful verdict for Johnny Depp. And because of that, like, this is a huge signal of support for his case. And I think it makes it clear, it makes it a clear showing that the jury believed that Amber Heard lied in her characterization of Johnny Depp as a domestic abuser in the op-ed. Now, on Amber Heard's side, the two statements that were found to not be defamatory are very interesting to look at, right? Because those are the two generalized hoax statements. The one that was defamatory was the one that was going into detail about Amber and her friends being in on it, and the details about the ordering of the event, saying that, they called the cops, decided that wasn't enough, so they roughed the place up. They they roughed the place up, and then they called the cops again, and then they did this and that, all this kind of stuff. So it could very well be that the jury looked at all of those details and said, either I don't think that the friends were involved, or I think that the ordering of, like, the specifics involved in that incident are not, are not the way that things actually ended up happening. So that could be the case. But one thing that is for sure is that they said that those two statements that were generalized hoax statements, they did not disagree with the idea that the hoax statements, the generalized idea that she had committed a hoax, were not defamatory. There's a lot of negatives in there. Basically, what I'm saying is Adam Waldman said Amber Heard committed a hoax about the DV claims. Those general statements, the jury looked at and said, that's not defamatory, either because it's not a lie or because there's no actual malice. There could be a number of ways that they got there. But basically, you can't say that the jury found that the statement that she had committed a hoax was defamatory, because that's not what they found. So let me just take a look here. I have a bunch of notes for this one. So yeah, we have some theories here about how they arrived at this conclusion. It could be that there was some kind of a holdover on the jury that decided, I still don't feel like Amber Heard is a complete loser in here and I feel bad for her or something. That's always a possibility on juries, right? Because these are human beings. Like, people want to feel okay with the verdict one way or another. So there could have been some aspect of this that was splitting the baby, so to speak, where they basically said, okay, we're going to give the overall win to Johnny, but we're going to throw her a bone over here because, like, I don't know, for whatever reason, to say, these specific statements, we don't necessarily like that this lawyer went and talked to the media about these specifics and dragged in these friends that are no longer friends with Amber, supposedly, according to their deposition testimony, and all this other stuff. There could have been an element there where they felt bad for the friends, even. That could be an element here. Whether or not that's proper, a lawyer is going to disagree with that, most likely. But that could be, and that would be a fine reasoning for the jury to come to, right? Like, that's not something that really realistically would be overturned on appeal, at least not on the basis of that reasoning. So it could also be that they just felt like Adam Waldman was shady. It could have something to do with his assertions of the attorney-client privilege during his deposition. If that's the case, that is problematic, because this was something that we were talking about quite a bit on this channel during the trial, saying, there was something about showing that entire deposition testimony or deposition video for Adam Waldman, where he's asserting the attorney-client privilege over and over and over again, that it can start to look like he's hiding something when he's not. And it's perfectly reasonable and perfectly allowable and legal and proper for him to assert the attorney-client privilege, which actually he doesn't even have the ability to waive in the first place, because the attorney-client privilege is owned by the client. So only the client can waive it. The attorney cannot. Or another possibility is that the jury just may have been straight up unconvinced of some things having to do with those details within that particular hoax statement. So That's the verdict, basically. I hope you guys are I hope that enlightened some things for some folks. But basically, it's not a crazy verdict, in my opinion. And I think that those of us who were on the panel, who were watching the whole time, that were commenting on it, we ultimately reached the conclusion that Johnny was probably going to win. That was the proper result for this, right?